Welcome back. Three voices, three perspectives, one very big story linking racism to a sitting prime minister. Let's bring in a panel to discuss a scandal unlike anything we've ever seen before in a federal election campaign. Fareed Khan is founder of Canadians United Against Hate. He's here in the studio from Toronto. Denise Balkisoon is a columnist for the Globe and Mail, and political commentator Aleem Kanji is a vice president at Sutherland Corp. Denise, I hate to ask you, but some people don't get why this is offensive. Why is this offensive, even if it was taking place 20 years ago?
I think 20 years ago isn't that long ago, because the history, most prominently of Blackface, should be known to people. It is hundreds of years old. The earliest part of the 20th century, there was so much Blackface, people dressing up as Asian people, and Brownface. I think of like the Peter Sellers movie in 1968. It is using other people's appearance and culture as a way, as a costume at best, and as something to make fun of at worst, something to make, and so it's pretty offensive, and I think we've known for a while.
I'm just curious, why, I mean, does this explanation today ring true to you? Do you really just forget these things and have a massive blind spot, or were your antenna twitching a little bit on that one?
I mean, they have done so much opposition research to surface things. It seems hard for me to believe that they didn't do the same of their own candidates, especially their prime minister.
Okay, I'm asking you, Fareed, now. I mean, does this apology reflect that Trudeau actually understands what he did was so wrong, or do you think there was more to be done?
Well, I think both. I watched the interview last night when the news story broke. He appeared contrite. He appeared sincere. He admitted that it was wrong. He called it what it was, which is racism. And, you know, he did the things that needed to be done when something like this happens. It is racist. It's offensive. It's microaggression in some ways against people of color, and certainly brown people. Mm-hmm. And his response was entirely appropriate. However, he has to learn from this moving forward. And not just him, but all the leaders have to learn from this, that when we're talking about racism and hate and bigotry in Canada, which is growing, that there needs to be more than just talk. There needs to be more than just words. There needs to be decisive action, and the government has not acted decisively to counter the hate narrative that we've seen growing in Canada over the last number of years.
All right, Aleem, get into this conversation. Do we judge Trudeau by his actions in the present, or do you judge him by what happened 18, 20 years ago?
You know, look, we've talked about this for the last almost 24 hours now, and I'm going to bring up that Justin Bieber song again and say, is it too late to say sorry? Because he did it last night, he did it again today, and I think this is opening up a wider conversation around race in this country. A lot of people said that this election really doesn't have a big issue. There's no change mandate here. Mm-hmm. And what actually are we talking about? And I think when you look at the issues, Don, around Bill 21, when you look at some of the changes in Quebec, that quite frankly, none of the three leaders are talking about, because they are all wanting to hold on to those seats and build their base in Quebec. I think this opens the opportunity to talk about how divisive some of those things are, and quite frankly, how insulting they are to all Canadians, not to brown people, not to white people, but to everybody. And I think that's where this conversation should go. And I sit in a privileged position to be able to talk to you and your viewers about that. But I think that's where we should be going with this narrative today.
That's interesting. Denise, do you think that's possible? This campaign now will turn into a debate about racism, past, present, and how to deal with it in the future?
I think that would be great. I think it's true that we haven't been talking about Bill 21 enough. We haven't been talking about the way that our immigration policy can be racist towards people. I think that would be great. I don't know. I've always encountered a reluctance to talk about racism as a systemic problem in Canada, and I think now everyone's like, oh, Justin Trudeau, he wore a racist costume. I would like to see the conversation go beyond that.
I guess I'm wondering, Fareed, if what you thought of Jagmeet Singh. He took a different approach. He took it out of the political realm and turned it into sort of a societal look at people who suffer from racism daily and how they should be looking at this and dealing with this. What did you think of his response?
I think his response is entirely appropriate because we seem to discuss these issues in silos, and the fact is that racism has been pervasive in Canada. We usually look to the U.S. and say, oh, it's bad there, but it's much better here. But no, we do have racism. All you have to do is look at the way blacks are treated, at the way Indigenous Canadians are treated. Muslims, certainly since 9/11, have felt persecuted, and now we have what's happening in Quebec, where the government has passed, which is a clearly racist bill, which is targeting people of faith. It's mainly meant to target Muslims. And I think the one thing that this incident is doing, and I think hopefully it continues to do for the rest of the campaign, is raise the issue of racism and how we're going to deal with it. The government put out an anti-racism strategy in the spring after consultations following the M103 debates. But in my view, and the view of a number of people who contributed to the discussions around that, it was entirely inadequate. The government needs to be more aggressive in targeting racism and hate. Both the RCMP and CSIS have come out and said in reports a number of years ago that the primary security threat in Canada is not foreign-inspired terrorism, it is white supremacy. And I think we need to look at that, and this issue, I think, is going to bring the debate around to that discussion.
I guess the one thing that a lot of people were talking about as a result of Trudeau's news conference today, Denise and Liam, I'll get you to come in on this, is that he can't remember this video incident, and he can't remember if there's any more, so he's being wary of saying there's no more. I got to tell you, I've never put on any kind of blackface, brownface, or anything else, and I'm sure everyone remembers if they did. Does that ring questionable to you, Aleem and Denise?
I find it astounding that he doesn't remember. And Mr. Prime Minister, if you're listening to me right now, please remember, put it on the table. I mean, you got to come clean with this stuff, and it's going to hurt him in the campaign. It will be taken advantage by the other two leaders. And with respect to Jagmeet Singh, I know you talked about this in the earlier question. This was a gift. This was an opportunity for Justin Trudeau to pick up the phone and to call Jagmeet Singh, not to do a photo op, to pick up the phone and call him today and say, hey, you know what? I heard you speak last night. I listened to you. I understand what you face as an ethnic minority. I understand you are the first person to run for Prime Minister as a leader of a major party, and I want to talk to you about that. I want to address your concerns, and he didn't do that today. He missed a serious opportunity, and he still has that opportunity. So he should be making that. And I think it's not about scoring political points, but it's about, and not reading the talking points, but it's about being human about this. And we saw that come through with Mr. Singh. And I think Mr. Trudeau has got an opportunity to do that in the hours, if you're listening, or in the days ahead.
I don't remember. Denise, what does that tell you about this?
No, I mean, as I said, they've been surfacing so many things about Conservative Party candidates. I find it quite hard to believe that they didn't do the same research, especially on the leader of their party.
And I think that strategy of taking, Don, if I can, of using and issuing videos and memes and photos of other candidates that we've seen the Liberals do. If I was advising them or asked for my advice, I would say hold back on that and focus on the issues. And in fact, if you want to talk about your record, talk about your record, but don't be casting blame and throwing mud at other candidates, because you are in absolutely no position to do that if you want to form government.
Although it did get them to have Andrew Scheer say, well, if people apologize, then I'm not going to kick them out of my party. So is he going to stand by that? I mean, he's saying that Mr. Trudeau has to resign, but it doesn't ring true, because he just said if you apologize, he'll forgive you.
That's right.
Yeah, he's apologized. Let's see what happens. Fareed?
Well, to follow up on that comment, I find, to use a pun, the sheer hypocrisy of what Andrew Scheer said to be astounding. Here's a man who appointed somebody as his campaign chair, who was a co-founder of Rebel Media, who was involved in organizing anti-Muslim hate rallies around the M103 debates. Here's a man who, on the very day in June when he was talking about there's no place for racists and bigots in the party, allowed one of his own MPs, Michael Cooper, to make overtly racist statement in a committee hearing, and rather than kicking him out, he gave him a slap on the wrist. So I'm sorry, Mr. Scheer is in no position to be lecturing on this matter.
All right, I don't think this is over. We're out of time. Thank you all for this discussion. Very entertaining and interesting, insightful.